Many of you wonder who's the best. Some people wonder who is a member of the best as well. People are concerned about what? People are concerned that some people fudge a little bit and say they're a ranger when they're not a ranger. They say they're a Green Beret when they're not a Green Beret. They'll say they're recon when they're not recon. And they'll say they're a SEAL when they're not SEAL, right? And there are other things too. MARSOC, or I worked in nuclear weapons, or I was a special guard at the White House, or whatever it is. There's a bunch of fabricators. There are some people who were in the military and got honorable discharges, and they still tell sea stories about what they actually did. And then there are some people who are not allowed to tell you everything or demonstrate to you that they have the knowledge that goes along with the DD-214, right? The DD-214 is supposed to tell you some things about what you did in the military, right? It's supposed to tell other people your qualifications and skills that you learned in the military, and what kind of rank you had, how much sea service you had, how much combat service you had, right? It doesn't always accurately reflect everything. There are things you could learn in the military that are never going to be on your DD-214, right? For example, if you become a movie star and everything you learned in the military contributed to your acting ability and your ability to generate good verbiage for a script or something, that might never be on your DD-214, right? There are people like Lee Ermey, who was a staff sergeant in the Marines. He was later promoted to gunnery sergeant based on, it was an honorary promotion based on his service in public affairs to the Corps. Basically, he made a lot of good movies and inspired people to become Marines. It's a recruiting role, is to get out of the Marines and do something that would promote the Corps in a way that people would want to join and become Marines. And he did a better job than a lot of other people of higher rank, or of like generals and colonels and such, that have moved a lot of people into the Corps through the court system sometimes, or through the school system, selecting people who might need a little bit of training, right? And in the Marines, and the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, they train you with weapons, they train you with rockets sometimes, or explosives. And you have to get what if you're going to do that? You have to get some good discipline, right? And that means you have to know the difference between right and wrong, or you might use a rocket or a weapon on somebody you shouldn't use the rocket or the weapon on. In combat, they give you rules of engagement, and if you're going to be somebody who's going to serve in the Marines or the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, you need to be able to follow the rules of engagement, which means you need to act and behave ethically, right? They don't want you to be on the front page of the newspaper or on CNN because you're in a court-martial for killing somebody that you shouldn't have killed, right? And right now we do have that trial going on. It's a Navy SEAL that's been charged with murder, but it's likely that he'll either be acquitted or pardoned. Those kind of things do happen on the battlefield, and as you see, confusing place. There's a lot of smoke, and there's a lot of gunfire, and there are tempers flare, and there are emotions involved when people die. And when you're out there in a situation that is similar to when people died in the past, then there are also emotions associated with that, because somebody's been shooting at you for an hour or two, and now all of a sudden you have to do something, and you might want to interrogate somebody and get a little rough. And sometimes you'll notice there's 10 or 15 other people that are prisoners, and if you smoke this one prisoner, then maybe the other ones will cooperate, and you can find out where the weapons are, where the explosives are, and such, right? So if you're a head case and you can't handle explosives in your community for law enforcement, or for a research lab on campus or something like that, then you're never going to get in the Navy SEALs. You're never going to get in the CIA. You're not going to be an Army engineer or probably anything else, because you have mental illness and you can't do those kinds of things, right? Because in the CIA and the SEAL teams, they teach you explosives, right? And they teach you sniper rifle. They teach you all those weapon systems as well as explosives, and they teach you how to manufacture explosives in the SEAL teams. And a lot of the people at CIA know something like that because they have a chemistry degree, and they have a need to know how to do that. And the reason you would need to know how to manufacture explosives is if you were going to rescue somebody overseas, right? So you went into a country and you had to fly in the airport, but you had to get to a location either in that country or an adjacent country where you couldn't take any gear. You couldn't take long rifles and all that, but you could get to a makeshift prison, a jail, something where somebody is being held. You need to break them out and get them home, right? So you're in a hostage rescue mission or a prisoner of war mission, something like that, and you need to manufacture your own explosives overseas so that you could go in and grab somebody. And that's the nature of some of the work the Navy SEALs do, is they're in hostage rescue and they be involved in rescuing POWs or something like that, right? But you don't want to go through the front door. You might not have all the weapons you need, or you might have got in there with some pistols or got some pistols from the CIA, but they might be better armed and they will probably be well trained, and you might want to find the weak point, right? It's like a dragon. On a dragon, you know, read the Lord of the Rings or something, there's a Smog, and he has a little weak point, right? And you shoot the arrow at the weak point and you take down the dragon, right? Well, in a concrete wall, there's a weak point, right? There might be rebar all the way through it, but there's a point somewhere in a wall, a structure, or something where you can put some explosives there and you can take down the wall, or you can maybe ram it with a truck or something. Well, it just depends on what what you need to do. But in some cases, you may need to manufacture some explosives by going to the grocery store and a few other places around town and getting all the things you need to make some kind of improvised explosives so that you can blow a hole in a wall so you can rescue a prisoner. And probably you want to blow a hole close to the prisoner, right? You don't be driving around all the way through the prison looking for them. So you just try to find the closest exterior wall or roof or something that you can do that with. Or maybe you're going to come up through the sewer system or something like that, right? But to do that, you need some training, right? And that training involves explosives and handling explosives, manufacture explosives, right? But they don't let just anybody do that, right? You have to qualify mentally and physically, right? And part of that mental training, that physical training, is before you get in the phase where you start handling explosives, or later where you learn how to manufacture them, you need to be psychologically stable. And by teaching you, I mean by harassing you and crunching you physically and emotionally and psychologically, they can detect flaws in your character, flaws in your reasoning, flaws in your mental fitness to handle explosives or work in those environments, right? It's not just that you're qualifying to do a lot of push-ups, or you can run far, or you can stay awake for long periods of time. It's that when you have to do a lot of running and you do a lot of physical activity and you got somebody screwing with you, that when you've done all that you're still emotionally stable enough that you use the explosives to blow a hole in the wall, not to blow up your team. You'll use your training for the mission and not to blow up the supermarket in Montgomery, Alabama or something like that, right? That you're training, or the federal building or something, right? Like Tim McVeigh out there in Waco. The Waco thing happened out there, but the Oklahoma City, right? That you'll use all your training and your experiences and knowledge to go after targets that are on the mission list, right? Not to do things that you're qualified to do but shouldn't be doing. So there's an element of what? There's an element of testing and verification and qualification in terms of the skills, but also in terms of your psychological fitness, your emotional fitness, and in some respects your fitness under duress, right? That you won't get so psychologically unstable after Hell Week that you want to kill the BUDS instructor, right? That's part of the reason they send you through Hell Week is they want it to be grueling, but from a psychological and medical standpoint, they want to make sure you're still stable emotionally and psychologically after that you don't harbor some animus after that where you want to harm somebody. So there's some counterintelligence involved in that, and it's a medical counterintelligence that counterintelligence and the medical staff work together to make sure that you're physically fit enough to do the mission, but also emotionally and psychologically fit through Hell Week and beyond. Because some things you get angry about in Hell Week, if they stick with you, you don't want that kind of person in the SEAL team. So when it comes to psychological qualifications, there's nothing like Hell Week, and there's nothing like the SEAL teams, right? There are a lot of qualifications you will notice in someone who went to BUDS or to the SEAL teams, right? They put down Navy SEAL or something like that on their DD-214. You go, well, yeah, they're qualified, right? Well, what does that qualify them for? And it doesn't say everything, right? Now we have a lot of movies, we have a lot of media products that people from the Navy Special Warfare community and people from the CIA have produced to let people know what kind of qualifications those are. If it says SEAL Qualification testing or SEAL Qualification, then what does that mean? And when it says Green Beret, when it says Army Ranger, what do those things mean, you know? And that Ranger School is 72 days and SEALs is 6 months to a year, right? And if you're an 18 Delta SEAL combat medic, then what kind of qualification is that, right? And yeah, they are medics or corpsmen who go to medic school, right? And they go to Army medic school. It's cheaper because we can train with the Army, and B, the Army has a real good course. It's a year long. And you start at Fort Sam Houston, and then you go up to Fort Bragg for the rest of their qualification training in the goat lab, where they take care of a goat as their patient. And up there at Fort Bragg, some of the team members, they go along, right? Because we train with the Army a little bit, and we try to harden the Army sometimes. And they can't do everything that we do. We go to prison sometimes and harden our SEALs, and we teach them to get a little hustle, do a little smuggling in prison, and get in trouble sometimes, so that the experience will be a little bit more difficult than if we just sent you there and you didn't do any hardening, right? That you needed an aggressor in there. You needed a gang that was going to try to attack you and your boys, and you're not necessarily going to be in there with the SEAL team. You're going to be in there kind of on a loner mission with maybe one or two of your buddies, but you're going to need to affiliate with somebody. It's going to be the Mexicans or the blacks, or Crips, Bloods, Vatos, Cholos, something, right? It's the Latin Kings or something like that. Well, you're going to learn a little bit about America inside of a prison, get some sensitivity training, and they're going to teach you where some of those Marines came from and give you some good counterintelligence skills, as well as some hardening. And hardening is mental toughness that comes from being in a place like prison or something. And it's not something you can always get in a place like Navy boot camp at Great Lakes, or Army boot camp at basic recruit training at Fort Benning, right? That there is a certain amount of hardening that people they get from combat, and Navy SEALs, they need that hardening before they ever get to combat. They need to be prepared for combat. You get some of the hardening in BUDS, and some of the hardening would be like, well, a guy expressed an interest in the SEALs at 17, or a counselor or somebody says he'd be good at that, and he just needs to be toughened up a little, because that kid thinks he's tough, and he wants to be tough, but he needs someone to toughen him up. And a boot camp in high school, you know, a sheriff's office boot camp, or some kind of hardening program, juvenile hall for 90 days, or state youth authority for 90 days. They get that kid hardened up, and they wipe the record clean and send him off to boot camp, right? And they teach them things, and people say, well, how can you send somebody from juvenile hall to handle explosives? And I'd say, well, if you if you sent anybody else, I'd be surprised if we got anybody who is capable. You know, that there are movies they make about people who come out of prisons and jails that are pretty good warriors, and it's like the joke in Full Metal Jacket. You just kind of have to keep throwing hand grenades at them, and they're the best people, right? There's an animal mother in the movie, and but the thing is there's the movie The Dirty Dozen, right? A bunch of criminals they let out of a prison, and they're running around Europe killing Nazis or whatever. But it's that kind of concept that does lead to some pretty tough guys that are capable of completing the training. And what you also have to have is it's a little bit of intellectual skill as well. So you can't just select anybody for the SEAL teams. They have to be smart enough to do the job. There's physics and science education that goes along with most of the jobs, and you need to be pretty smart. You need to have about 130 IQ, and you need to be able to do the tasks physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically. You can't get worn down to the point where you can't continue, or if you get too psyched out, you ding the bell or whatever. In the Green Berets, you need about 110, 115 IQ, depending on the MOS, and obviously there are smarter people in the Green Berets, and they go to better teams. They go to more challenging assignments, right? Some work in security, some work in the Army Security Agency or the White House Communications Agency, Defense Security Services. Out of all those, special operations, special forces, special warfare units, people do go on to those things, right? And when it comes to figuring out who's who by the public, you can't always do that. That there are people who could show you a DD-214 and you'd be convinced, and there are people who can forge one of those things. And everybody at CIA could go over and forge one, but not everybody at CIA can understands the hardening process, understands the qualification process, what people qualify in, why they qualify, what kind of missions they do in the Green Berets, the SEALs, and the Rangers, right? And not everybody has been on one of those missions, and if you haven't done all that, you have a hard time explaining yourself, even if you're real smart, right? And that some things are not what they seem is kind of what you have to understand about the CIA and the special warfare community, right? You hear it there's a line in the movie, The Recruit, with Chase Brandon. He's a consultant to Hollywood, and he says, things are not what they seem. And it's true that you might see me running around in an Army uniform, but I'd be doing counterintelligence in the SEAL teams. And that's kind of a spy uniform, or a spy rank, spy uniform. I never was a sergeant in the Army, but I spent a lot of time doing counterintelligence. One of the programs they have in the Army was called Special Atomic Demolition Munition. And Navy SEALs were involved in that, as well as the Army Green Light teams, which were engineer units that had these 1 kiloton backpack 53-pound nuclear weapons, and I worked in security and counterintelligence for those programs. And they're still around. They haven't been destroyed. They can't really just destroy them because they have to ship them somewhere, and they didn't want to ship them because if they shipped them, it's a big security risk. You don't want a train to fall off the tracks and donate nuclear weapons to everybody in Klan County or wherever else that President Clinton and President Obama weren't interested in relocating the weapons to, right? There are some people who would say it'd be okay to move, and then some people, they say those people will figure out when it's coming and when to knock over the train, right? It's like The Great Train Robbery was a good movie for some people, right? But, you don't get to do the best counterintelligence if you're walking around with your general stars on, or with your Colonel Oakleafs on, or your Lieutenant Colonel Oakleafs, or your Commander Oakleafs, whatever you want to call it. You can't do all that counterintelligence that you need to do in an undercover role on the surface if you're wearing the wrong uniform. You need to get in and talk to the Army sergeants and the Green Berets and the MPs and the Civil Affairs MPs and all those people. You need to understand their program, what they're up to, and what they think about. And then we transitioned to a different program when it came to security. They wanted contractors, they wanted SEALs, they wanted people who were hardened a little bit differently, and people they trusted a little better with nuclear weapons. That was during the Clinton administration. I did counterintelligence and recruiting for those programs, and I walk around in a sergeant uniform. But I was a naval officer, and most of your sergeants can't explain some of the things that I can explain. Not just about how to, fire a recoilless rifle or throw a hand grenade or, dig a foxhole or pitch a tent or whatever they think is a soldiering skill. Yeah, those are our soldiering skills, and I know how to teach it, I know how to train it, and I know how to explain it. But that's not what I spend my day doing, and that's not what I spend my day explaining, right? And some people, when they want to know, is he one of us? Is he real? Is he a SEAL? Is he a Ranger? Is he a Green Beret? Is he part of SOCOM? Is he a sergeant like that paper says? Or, they want to go for information that they think should come out of your mouth based on what's on your DD-214, right? Some DD-214s are nonsense. They print you something and they marginalize your capabilities, rank, medals, everything, and send you to the CIA. When they do that, you have to get a new identity. You have to burn your old identity in a burn bag, right? And that's part of the undercover role that you pull at CIA. Is that your past is undercover, right? And you'll wait 25 years plus some, probably based on how long you stay at CIA, before you can talk about it, right? Once a sufficient amount of time has elapsed, or somebody gives you some liberty to go and talk about some things, then you can do that, right? And in the SEAL teams, you might have gone down to Colombia and pulled security for the DEA or for the State Department or something. At some point, they may give you the liberty to talk about some things, right? If they don't want to give you the liberty, you won't get the liberty for that, right? But that's not something they put on your DD-214. DEA Security, Colombia, Medal of Valor, or whatever the hell you did down there. So probably a lot of valor to walk around the jungle. There's more landmines killing people in Colombia now than Afghanistan, right? Or than any other country in the world, actually, right? Because they go out in the jungle, they make cocaine, and then they build a submarine, and then they try to get it either to Cuba or up into the Americas somewhere, right? And so there's a lot of danger involved in that, and you don't get to choose whether you're going to go down there because you made it through BUDS and qualification. You're qualified to follow orders and not question what assignments they give you. So if you're qualified for what they want you to do, they'll send you there and you'll do it. And there aren't any more bells you can ding along the way. You'll realize at BUDS that there's a bell there and you can leave and you're no longer a volunteer, you're gone. But once you volunteer, there's a point of no return. At graduation, they give you a trident and you go to the fleet, and then you'll used to be, I guess you get the trident a couple years later. But once you go to the fleet, you're not going to ding a bell. You're going to do the mission. You'll get your trident at some point. There's a war on, I think someone might get their tridents before they die or something is the thing, right? Which is a good thing. But back in the day, there was a war and we got our tridents years later. I got mine a long time after I graduated, and the reason is I had volunteered for counterintelligence and some other special duties, and I recruited, and I couldn't sit there and roll with my tridents and my SEAL team hats and all that. Now I have an opportunity to explain the past, and the past is difficult to explain, right? There's people who's like, who's the best? And what do you mean by who's the best? Is it who's technically qualified in being an 18 Delta medic? Well, the SEALs usually pretty qualified just like those guys, and they read a lot of medical information, medical literature, they research diseases, they learn how to pull teeth and learn how to do x-rays and learn how to read x-rays even, and learn how to, splint an arm if someone has broken arms and things like that, or a sprain or something like that, and do a cast for a broken arm or something, set bones. There are people who learn how to put in a chest tube in an animal, because you can't really practice on people. And there's a reason that people don't talk about that usually, because it's upsetting to some people who are animal rights lovers, right? And I'm an animal lover, but I understand that I love the Marine more than I love my dog. And that if my dog had to die for the Marine, I'd be happy the dog sacrificed himself for a Marine. And the same with the goat. If the goat has to be used for, training purposes so that we can have qualified Marines or qualified SEALs and qualified Green Berets to provide medical assistance to either our team or the natives or something, I'm for the training. I'm not for holding back on that training. We need all the resources we can to get people up to speed. They don't have to train on that goat very often, but once it gets some experience, it probably won't need the goat anymore, right? But you don't want to practice on a person. A chest tube is a serious thing, and there's other things they do with the goat, right? They just don't do one, malady. They have a few things they have to remedy in its health so that it survives, and it's traumatic what they do to an animal, but it's also something you can find on the internet, right? There's information about it. It's not some kind of top secret thing, but it's something that upsets PETA groups and all those kind of people. And there's a reason they don't put that on the DD-214 either, right? It doesn't say I shot a goat and kept it alive for an hour or 10 hours or a couple days. They don't put the fact that you know how to manufacture explosives so you can break into a prison overseas and rescue a hostage. But people watch a movie, they see a clip or something, and then you're supposed to believe in it, right? You're supposed to believe that if the person's SEAL qualified, that they can do those kind of things, right? And some people are qualified, and they talk about it to an extent, and then they know there's discretion you have to show with who you tell. And for me, I don't tell too many people how to do that stuff, because it's not something I want to train people in the hood how to do, or train people in law enforcement to do. It's something I don't do. I have another job. I work at CIA, and I work with Homeland Security with mental health people, right? And I'm learning about the mental health business, and it is a business in some cases, and community mental health resource. I've been doing it for over 20 years in VA hospitals and local community health programs and law enforcement programs. And I've been an aggressor, I've been a researcher, and I've developed a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge in that area. And one thing I don't do a lot of is talk about explosives and sniper rifles and things like that. I know how to do a lot of things. I know how to make a poisonous knife, right? You can go online, they'll teach you how. Some spider venom and a worm, you mix it up, make a little brew, and paint it on the knife under a little heat. It'll stick to the knife, and your knife would be poisonous just like those Filipino guys, right? And do I make explosives? Never. I know how? Yes. Do I know how to make the timing circuit and all the electronics? Oh yeah. Well, any radioman or electronics tech in the Navy probably know enough to where if you trained them and taught them a few things about alarm clocks and cell phones and a few other circuits, that they could build things from improvised equipment. Why would you need that? If you go overseas and you have to fly in on an airliner, and then you have to transit the country or go into another part of the country or another country, and then you have to buy some supplies and manufacture a bomb to blow a hole in a prison or a jail or a makeshift detention facility so you can pull out a hostage or a POW, you're going to do that. And it's a requirement in the training that they teach you that, or that you know enough, say like the cook and the mess specialists and the SEAL teams, they know how to mix things and how to measure things, and that if they were on the phone or a radio with somebody speaking one of the languages they speak, they may be able to get a recipe going from household products, and they might be able to make what they need to breach the facility they need to breach, right? They don't have a need to train people in that in the Army engineers, right? Because Army engineers don't do that so much. So they don't get as much training in, say, explosives manufacturing. There are people who know how to do it, and over the years they know enough about what they're handling anyways that people don't get as concerned that they might manufacture it, right? And there are people, obviously, with much less training than the Navy SEALs who have manufactured much bigger bombs than the Navy SEALs generally manufacture, like Tim McVeigh and his buddy Terry Nichols, who's probably about due to get out of prison, right? He went in about 97. So that would put you at 2002, about 2022. I think he's doing 25 years, right? And he'll be out in the next few years, I guess. But they manufacture a pretty large ammonium nitrate bomb, right? Which is NO3NH4. Nitrates is, people want to ban hot dogs because they put nitrates in hot dogs, and that's a critical component for a bomb, right? And there's a big factory somewhere where they got a bunch of nitrates that go into bologna and hot dogs, right? And people don't like those processed meats, A, because they say it's bad for you, but B, because they say it's bad for you because you can make bombs out of it. There's other places where they make the ammonium, right? There's, I don't know if it's in a Windex, they say it's ammonia D, right? But it's not far off. And when I made cheese in a cheese factory, I went in to do counterintelligence there. And there's quite a bit of ammonium. There's enough to gas the whole town, is what they say. But also, it's something that somebody could come in with a truck, load up on a truck, and drive it somewhere else, and then marry that up with something they drove off from a hot dog factory. And it's more than a chili cheese dog at that point, right? The guy'd come in, and take this truck A and truck B, and load them into truck C. And then he'd rig the truck, right? And then there's still some countermeasures along the road and out in the community. There's dogs and sensors. And, depending on how you load it and everything, you could probably get it to where you wanted to get it to. And if you drug the dogs at the courthouse or the federal building, then you'd have everything you need. And that's why when I worked at the CIA, I identified the fact that the dogs, their food was so important that you either make it on site or you bring it in a Brinks truck from a facility that's well protected. If you don't know about security, there's personnel security, and then there's logistical security, and there's operational security. There's security. And then, like, if you know the S shops in the Army and the Marines, it's S1, S2, S3, S4. S2 is security intelligence, but you need security for what? For personnel, which is S1. And S3, operations, you need OPSEC, right? You need operational security. And S4 is your logistics and your supply chain. So you need supply chain logistics security as well. So when it comes to career development for somebody who works in security, they need to work in those three areas as well, in staff positions, as well as they need to work in those areas as officers. They need to work in logistics, kind of embedded with other officers, right? And when you work in counterintelligence and security, they generally they don't tell you, on a DD 214 what all the undercover roles you worked in were. They might summarize it by saying you were a supply chain logistics security officer, a physical security officer, or a personnel. You work in personnel security investigations or something like that, right? And generally, you just summarize and say you're a counterintelligence officer, or you worked in security and intelligence career field, blah blah blah. And, but you break it down, you look at some of the undercover roles you did. You might have been sitting in a boot camp selecting people for Marine Corps MOS schools, right? And that's a counterintelligence role. And a lot of officers, that's a coveted position, right? That you could be in the officer selection service, selecting people to go to Quantico for the platoon leaders course, or you could be in boot camp selecting people for an MOS school at MCRD San Diego or MCRD Paris Island, you know, the sand fleas in Hollywood. And if you have one of those coveted jobs, then that role included counterintelligence, because you have to select people who are qualified for the job to attempt the training, as well as people who are likely to complete the training and people who meet the security requirements, right? And I did a lot of counterintelligence, and some of the counterintelligence is before you attempt the training or before someone attempts the training in the selection process, and some of it's during the training, and some of it's after the training. When it comes to those weapons programs the Army had, I talked about SAT-M for a second. Those people had counterintelligence before they started working there, during, and after. And some worked in calibration, some were operational roles. You know, there's radiation detection equipment used in calibration and in monitoring radioactive weapons, and some of that, it had to be calibrated, but it also, you know, you had to have people working in those facilities that didn't have diarrhea about their prior experiences as well, right? So if they was in nuclear weapons, they knew about nuclear securities and you know, procedures and things like that. We didn't want all that explained in the New York Times, so they put somebody like me in there, and I evaluate sometimes what's okay to disseminate and what's not, as well as make sure that people aren't disseminating the wrong things. And I knew how to shut people up, right? You slap them around and shut them up. Well, you don't always slap around a GS 13 or 14, 15, whatever, but you can look around and then you make the phone calls you need to make to keep someone's mouth quiet, or say they don't never need to work in another nuclear weapons program or things like that, right? That this job is good enough for them and they could do this kind of thing, but they need to learn to tighten up a little bit. Those are the kind of evaluations and recommendations you make through a year or so in a laboratory or in a, you know, a work environment that involves hazardous waste or nuclear waste or something, right? And that's a counterintelligence role, and they want to bring someone in with security credentials sometimes too, because their justification for it is, oh, this guy's good at securities from special ops, and you're counterintelligence, but you're also there because the use of deadly force is authorized, but the use of firearms is not. And why is that? Because they have like canisters full of radioactive gases, and if you shoot one, the canister's going to fly around the room, and everybody's going to be contaminated with radioactive air, right? It'll mix with the air. You have a radioactive gas in your lungs, you could get radiation sickness, and some people could die or something like that. So if you need to fight somebody in a lab, or either an external threat or an internal threat, you need to use your hands and fists and legs and blocks and punches and stuff, right? Kicks, blocks, and punches. And that comes from somebody with combat skills development training, right? Navy SEALs, they do a lot of combat skills, right? In a year, you'd be a black belt. And you'd be a black belt, but you'd be in top physical shape, right? You'd be in much better shape than most black belts. You'd be able to move faster, you'd be able to punch faster, you'd be able to kick faster. And when it comes to kicking and punching, it's F equals MA. Force equals mass times acceleration, right? So if you're big and heavy and you move real fast, then you're going to deliver a lot of force. So a big guy, if he's getting in real good shape and he's punching fast and kicking fast, it's more force, and more force is what's going to be it's going to knock somebody out, it's going to hurt somebody, things like that, right? If you're a little guy and you can't improve your mass, you can't get a whole lot bigger, but you can improve your speed. And you improve your speed, you improve your force, right? And they teach those relationships in BUDS and in the SEAL teams, and people know that exercise is a critical component to being a skilled black belt. And in the Marines, they have a martial arts program. It's called Marine Corps Martial Arts Program. And the Special Forces, the Army Special Forces, they teach them combat skills development. The Special Forces have a martial arts program, and they formalize these things, right? And they send Navy SEALs over there to teach over at the Army's program, right? And some people can fight one-on-one. Some people have to fight 1-on-2, 1-on-3, 1-on-4, 1-on-5. There's a few SEAL officers and such that can fight quite a few people, right? 5 people, 10 people, no problem. You know, when the guns start flying and everything, the guys start prioritizing what he has to do is to get a shield and get to the gun, right? And take one gun away so you can neutralize the rest of the threats. And if you got a threat, you can use them as a shield so that you can maneuver somewhere to where you can get a knife or a gun. They teach you that in the SEAL teams. They don't teach everybody in Army boot camp that kind of thing, right? And they teach you about protection, they teach you about offense and defense, but they also teach you never to quit. And in the Green Berets, we try to instill some of our training in their training, right? And not everybody in the Green Berets is at the same level, obviously, right? They have A teams and B teams. And it's just like a grade in college. A is better than a B. And A teams is more physical, they get a lot more combat skills development, right? Beyond Halo, and Scuba, and all that kind of stuff, there's pretty high speed in the A teams, right? And we go in and we go to their 18 Delta medical qualification. We recruit people for JSOC, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6. We recruit on our basis, but we're part of the Delta Force recruiting. We do some of the counterintelligence with the Army. We work with them to get the best into their programs, right? And to help train the best at the Delta compound at Fort Bragg. But it's not the same as the SEAL teams, right? The Marines, over the course of a 4-year enlistment, you could become a black belt, right? Maybe 4 to 8 years, right? And it just depends on how much you put into it. Probably in 4 years, it wouldn't be hard to do. And the thing is, there's a difference, like I said. There's a difference between the SEALs and some guy in the Marines who's got to go learn an MOS and all those things. Once you graduate from BUDS, you're going to go to SEAL Qualification testing training, and you can go to the teams, and you're going to practice an art or a skill that is combat related for the most part, right? I'm going to sit in a maintenance facility and fix vehicles or radios or something like that, right? And then part of your job is PT in the morning or something. The SEALs is a very high up-tempo job that involves a lot of combat skills, involves some technical things related to the mission and related to your job, but it's not the same, because in the SEAL teams it's 24/7, and you know, all of it is combat related, right? And there are people in the Marines that's the same thing, right? The infantrymen, and they focus on physical fitness and combat skills development, right? And there are people in the Marines, it's signals, intelligence, other career fields is not all combat related, right? And same with those Army Special Forces. They have people who are pretty much combat oriented, which is the A team. And the B team, sometimes they go out and they provide medical assistance overseas to people who need medicine or dental work or something like that. And they have surgeons and doctors they work with. 18 Deltas to run a clinic with them. And they have some things like they build a school for elementary children, and the SAPs, people make coloring books and things, and they have English teachers that come in and teach schools in a little village, and that's how they win hearts and minds. And the CIA will be able to recruit out of that village sometimes for people who help in homeland security, intelligence work, and such like that, right? But that's not all combat related, right? But the SEAL is pretty much all combat related, and those are some of the major differences. To explain it, because, you know, sometimes you think you could look at someone's DD-214 and see everything, and you can't. This guy like Lee Ermey, you go to Hollywood, it didn't say on his DD-214 that he was a movie actor. There's a Marine who became a billionaire. It didn't say on there that he was smart enough to become a billionaire, or he had this insane drive to make money, right? And he was a sergeant, right? And there's other people like that. The guy who founded Taco Bell, it didn't say on his DD-214 that he knew how to make Taco Bell for you, right? It doesn't say that anywhere. But, and, you know, there's these t-shirts. I think they're kind of funny because I have a PhD and I worked at the CIA. And they say, I don't have a PhD, but I have a DD-214. Well, I find it insulting kind of at first. There's some real bright people who have PhDs, and they were in the Corps. And people know that. When you go to the Corps, you go to the recruiting office, you walk in the door, the guy asks you, do you want to be famous? Do you want to be this? And there are some jobs that maybe someday you'll be famous. Some of those broadcast journalism jobs for the Corps, public affairs, you could end up being a newscaster like Bernie Shaw at CNN, or like Dan Rather, and you could be a congressman like a very liberal man in Oakland who died. His name was Ron Dellums, who said there was never a weapon system that Ron ever wanted. He didn't like any of them, including the Marines. But Ron was a Vietnam vet, I believe, and there's a whole bunch of other Marines that you can look at in the book that are famous Marines. Some were famous for the medals, and some were famous for their careers after the Corps. And the Marine Corps is trying to set you up, and the thing they're setting you up for is success. Academic success is one of those things. Entrepreneurial success is another one. But once you learn that Marine Corps mindset, you learn how to be a member of a team and build a esprit de corps as a leader in the Corps, then you're going to have all the right stuff. You're going to have all the assets you need to take your career to the next level or take your education to the next level. You might not get your degree while you're serving in the Corps. There's not a lot of time for that. You might be on a ship. You might be deployed overseas. But when you're done with your hitch, with your enlistment, you can go on and get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and even a PhD or a medical doctorate, right? And it's not for everybody in medicine or the Corps, but and education is not for everyone either. Some people would be an electrician, get electrician's business, or just work for somebody in a union, put bumpers on a car up at Detroit, right? But the Corps will try to set you up for success, and everybody in the Corps should want to live the American dream too. They want a house, they want a car, and they want a smoking hot babe for their wife, right? And the Corps wants you to stay in shape while you're in the Corps, and after you leave the Corps, they want you doing push-ups and running if you can. If you didn't get your legs blown off and your balls blown off, they want you to do what you can to make yourself look like a Marine. And that's why you'll see these Marines, they get out and they're all blown up or something, and they're trying to do the New York Marathon or the Boston Marathon or the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, and they're doing what? They're like in a buggy or something, pulling themselves across the finish line, right? They want to succeed just like everyone else, and they understand their limitations, but finishing the marathon is not one of their limitations, right? And that's what the Semper Fi is. It's always faithful. They're always faithful to the Constitution and American values, as well as faithful to the traditions of the Corps. So the Corps is a great place. It's not the same as the SEAL teams. It's not the same requirements. There's a lot of smart people in the Corps. There's a lot of physically talented people in the Corps. And there's some requirements, right? You just don't send anybody to the Corps, because you have to make sure they have the ability to learn the discipline they need to handle a weapon without turning it on the drill instructor or turning it on their fellow Marines, or, going out and becoming an active shooter. We want people in the Corps who have some values and ethics so they can follow the rules of engagement, and they know when to ask the doctor for a pill or some kind of rest because it's too much, right? They don't want people to go off the deep end in the Corps.